all of you who've come to join us today at the Swirl webinar. I'm Sid Probstein, and it is my great pleasure to be here with you today. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm here at the Swirl headquarters in Waltham, Mass, and behind me is our beautiful new screen set, or backdrop, I should say, and we're having a ton of fun with it. But let's go. You're going to need to go ahead and let me share my screen, Adam. All right, hopefully you guys can see my screen now. So what I'm here to talk about today is a very exciting time for Swirl. We're announcing availability of Swirl version 3. And why would you want to look at Swirl version 3? For one simple reason. It lets you deploy AI easily and affordably without pre-indexing all the data you might ever need to answer a question. You know, in these pretty intense times of competition and incredible new entries to the market every few minutes, it seems like, we really need a way to harness the power of AI and save time, but we need to do it safely. And we have tons of indexing technology across the enterprise. Making use of that is what Swirl is all about. And of course, it's not just for the enterprise. You can use it for a huge range of applications, as we're going to show you today. So what I want to talk about first is how we got here, where things started with Swirl 1.0 and what we're doing now with 3.0. And in particular, I want to talk about the two versions of Swirl, Community and Enterprise. And we're going to do demos of both, and we're going to take questions after that. So I've been a big fan of search and curious about how it can be applied for quite some time now. And when I realized that most of the enterprise workloads had actually moved to cloud, and a lot of the systems that were previously, on-prem, in DMZs, installed in data centers, had really moved to the cloud. And there was all of a sudden a public API, a standards-based approach for authentication. Using search, federated search or meta search, was an incredibly powerful way to access information across the enterprise and solve the silo or tab problem, as users call it. The first version of Swirl gave you zero code configuration of the search provider by abstracting away the problem of connecting to a search API. So no code, talk to lots of systems, send the query out. The second point was adapt that query for each source. There's no point in sending a long keyword search to a database that's really looking up company names. So things like the adaptive query processor reduce that query so that it gets only something it's likely to succeed with. And the last was using large language models not to generate text. That was when 1.0 came out, we were a little bit ahead of that stuff. It was all about ranking, finding the best results across sources. And frankly, if you look at the history of meta search or federated search, a lot of the challenges have been around these three things, quite honestly. First, can you reach things? Now there's an API, there's a standards-based way, a search provider will get you there. Can you make sense of the query for each source? The adaptive query processor handles that. And then can you make sense of the results, even if they're very different? That's exactly what large language models do, even across languages. So we got a lot of feedback on version 1. It was awesome to hear it. And in version 2, we put out a couple of key different things that we heard were required for success with enterprise search. Number one, subscribe mode. One of the great things about federated search is you can rerun the query again without having to hook the incoming data and sort of do this real-time processing of every single thing you might ingest. Just run the query every so often. Another key point, out-of-the-box integration with Microsoft Office 365. It is, after all, one of the most important and personal places where we store information in the enterprise, and being able to access that's absolutely critical. And last, who wants to show JSON, right, when you're trying to explain what the power of meta search and what Swirl could do? So the Galaxy Search UI was one of the results of the feedback we got from Swirl 2. Most recently with Swirl 3, we've continued absorbing as much feedback as we can and acting on it as quickly as we can, adding a bunch of key features that let you really harness the power of AI and build it into your own application. First and foremost, the result shopping cart. When you get a bunch of results from search, you very likely will want to use many of them, but you may not want to use all. So the ability to human direct the selected articles that you use for Retrieval Augmented Generation, that's a really important step. Also for RAG, the retrieval part, the R, really depends on fetching results. And so Swirl 3 features the new result fetcher. It can fetch pages, URLs, a variety of different things, and bring them back, clean them, and find the most relevant parts. And then the key to RAG is that generation. Swirl version 3 fetches the results, finds the best parts, and then binds those into your prompt and brings it to your choice of generative AI, such as ChatGPT. So you get back insight plus citations. So you can know for sure, you can verify it. And in addition, the prompt engineering does its best to make sure it uses only the data that we provide to try to reduce or eliminate hallucinations. Now, the power here is meta search moves to the role of a selector. So rather than going out pre-indexing everything, search all of the repositories that you have today, that you have access to. Search them as if you're a user so that you get the personal result with the information shared with you. Then take those unified results and do something with them. And that's what RAG is all about. So now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and just take you through the Swirl Community Edition, particularly in detail, what's new in 3.0 and what can you do with it. Since I just mentioned the community, I want to start by congratulating all of the folks who participated in Hacktoberfest, Harsh, Subramanyam, Vamshi, Biplab, Yash, Neil, and Saurabh. Thank you very much for your contributions, for taking the time to work with us and help us figure out how the guidelines we put out there have to be improved. All of these amazing new capabilities are in 3.0. Usually they're probably in the search provider subdirectory under the untested area for some of them. As they go through our testing process, they'll be moved into the production setup. But this is, we generally don't promote a search provider until it's been tested by at least one independent party other than us, as well as the creator. So we'll be continuing to update on those as they come out. So please watch the Swirl homepage. Really, the main features in 3.0 are the Retrieval Augmented Generation workflow. So here, again, the ability to select a set of results or just say, go ahead with the top N, fetch those documents, and brag them out with a prompt generation step. The kind of key components that make this all happen in addition to the workflow, the Galaxy UI, which has been updated, as you'll see in a moment, with two interesting switches that let you select items and actually generate the AI response. The new page fetcher component, as mentioned. Now, for RAG, one of the challenges, and I'm going to be very clear, I think we don't really recommend trying to do RAG with public data. For starters, I think if you really want to do just web data, Bing Chat and Google Bard are both doing an amazing job of this. It's very hard, and you'll need to focus a lot on fetching the pages and getting the clean parts of the article, avoiding navigation, for example, and advertisements. So a better source is some source that you control, for example, an Elastic, Solr, or OpenSearch index. Those will, since you'll presumably have access to those documents from where you're making the request, you should be able to do an amazing job of producing AI insight with those documents. So a similar public example that's not just sort of pure web data is European PMC. It's life sciences, science, technology, and medical content, very similar to US PubMed. So that comes pre-configured now for RAG, as you'll see, and so you can generate insights from all of the latest papers. We also have a bunch of new search providers for the new Swirl Today documentation center, docs.swirl.today, and also blockchain.com. If you want to actually search for Bitcoin transactions, etc., you can do that. You need your own API key for that. Also, one of the things you're going to see in a moment is that with the new version of Swirl 3, there's a new WebSocket API, which lets you get live interactions between the UI and the backend. So, for example, you'll see the UI updating with the complete RAG result when it's present. So let's, without taking even another second, let's go ahead and dive right in. I am going to show you a live example in just a moment. I wanted to start with just some screenshots here to make sure we have quick response times as we move through some of the concepts. So my first search using community version is Swirl RAG. And as you're going to see here, I went ahead and pulled up the selector switch. I did take out one result that was not so good, although it appears to be relevant. It's not quite the same RAG as what we're looking for. So we removed that one, and you can see a very nice response that summarizes the state of Swirl from the perspective of the public website. So I also searched for myself, and while I appreciate very much the commentary about what I've been working on, I think the interesting thing is to say that it's not very rich here, and it's because it's hard to fetch public data. For example, LinkedIn really won't provide a page back to any bot that tries to fetch it. So the quality of this is okay, but it could be a lot better. And again, you'll probably see much better if you look at something like Bing Chat. But here is a great example where using European PMC and life science content, we can produce a pretty remarkable and time-saving result. So if you're trying to understand some of the new solid tumor therapies, there's been amazing advances just in the past year, you can run this search and you can certainly look at all of the documents, but you can also get this very high quality summary, which is based on all the latest. And of course, here's one of the keys for RAG. You get back the citations. So if you doubt some of this or believe it's incorrect, you can go back to the source. In the enterprise, not all of the data is correct. So very often, right, you'll see you may get a summary that's incorrect, but it's probably based on either incorrect or competing data. And very often you'll see in the enterprise edition, the Swirl prompt engineering will actually have the AI respond saying there are multiple entities involved in this query, or there may be ambiguous data. So it will actually highlight that and call it out. Last, I wanted to point out there is now a search provider, so you can search the Swirl documentation from Swirl. And here is a brief summary of some of the capabilities related to tokens. And so you'll see here, it kind of summarizes it. I probably still need to go back and look at the links to get the detail if I'm trying to figure out which token I want to use, for example. But there's nothing to stop me from trying to focus that. So let's actually take a quick look. Let's run a real query here. I'm going to log in as admin. Just wanted to show part of Swirl is you always have to log in. There's always some user present. You cannot put a document into Swirl. It does not index documents, but it does accept security information such as a login. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to search Swirl for, let's say, bearer token, which is a little bit more specific version. And here I do have a result. Now I'm going to ask it, can you tell me a little bit about this? There's always a certain level of risk in trying this out, but here we go. It gave me a nice summary. It actually did it quite quickly. So it describes exactly which tokens I could use and also points me back at the documentation. So I think that's a pretty good outcome. So switching gears, what's new with Swirl Enterprise? Just for starters, Enterprise is built on top of Swirl Community. So it's a very easy thing to step up from. The key differences in Swirl Enterprise, number one, the authenticating page fetcher. So in Enterprise, it can fetch your Outlook documents, from OneDrive, for example. It can fetch your attachments. It can fetch messages and calendar. This is always under the admin's config when it's deployed. So it's not something that you can just accidentally have happen. It requires some setup. It has prompt support for email and calendar entries as well. So you will actually see if you're searching for someone who you're about to meet with, the AI may tell you you're about to meet with them. It may summarize your discussion history as well. The authenticating page fetcher is backed up by a document extractor that will, it's based on the open source Tika project, and that supports over 15,000 different file formats, including various types of PDFs. The chunk finder included with Enterprise locates the most relevant window of text versus your query. For long documents, which are very common in the Enterprise, this is a key step. And then there's a lot of prompt intelligence to handle document types, citations, and prevent hallucinations. Swirl Enterprise is available as an Azure container, meaning it comes in a Kubernetes pod, which supports both elastic scaling and self-service provisioning via the MS App Source, available very soon. Also, OpenID Connect with auto provisioning, so users can simply log in with Microsoft and be auto provisioned. And community, the deployer is responsible for those provisionings. Swirl Enterprise also supports Microsoft Power Automate, so you can use Power Automate to both bring queries into the system, bring results back out into various formats, and soon search from Swirl through any Power Automate system. So for example, if there's a database that you can access in Power Automate, you'll be able to query it right from Swirl without any configuration. Swirl's new Galaxy update also supports adaptive card display, which is really cool. We'll show you that in a second. And light LLM support for almost all the generative AIs out there. So if you want to use Llama 2 or you want to use Cohere or any of the others, they're all supported. You just plug in your keys. Swirl won't know the difference. So I'm just going to pause for a second and go ahead and configure. I'm going to switch gears to bring up my enterprise version of Swirl, and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so one of the most important features for enterprise and one of the most important use cases is a new team member, someone who joins your team and hears a word or learns about some capability or opportunity or relationship, and they aren't sure exactly what to do with it, or they aren't sure how to pursue it. So they might search for it. And here is an example of searching for a partnership, in this case, a company called Project Beratung, which is a friend of mine's company, and we are working together. And we can actually take a look and see that the nature of the relationship is that we are working together. Project Beratung and Swirl are working on a variety of European customer activities together. We're working on projects, doing some lead generation, et cetera. So this is a great summary that tells me about a relationship that I could make use of. At the very least, it tells me what questions I should ask next. Another query now. I did this earlier, swirl rag. Here again, you'll see that I made some selection just to avoid a random web hit, which looks relevant but isn't. And in this case, I have a much more detailed response because it incorporates content from my personal M365, my messages, my OneDrive, my calendar events. And you'll see here the citations, I get a much richer summary of what Swirl Rag can do. It's a more detailed as to the steps that it takes, and it's based on some internal data. So we see a little bit richer output here. Now, another example, if I search for my colleague Adam, in this case, I'm going to get back, I get a nice detailed summary of internal data with links to it, so I can go quickly back to find, for example, his resume or some of the other proposals that may have come in, etc. And last, here's actually another example of Swirl Rag, which I wanted to do live for you guys. So let's go ahead and take a peek at that. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch gears. Oh, I need to log out. So again, when I log into version of the software, now I have the ability to add my Microsoft account. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a search, just internal data about Swirl Rag. So bring back all the latest. So quite a bit of information. I'm not expecting that I would have to alter this, but I'm going to. I think that this update right here, this pull request, is probably not super important, although it does mention it. I'll take this one out too. And I'm not going to cover some of my calendar items. I could just actually unselect them all or focus just on Outlook messages if I wanted to, or any particular thing. I think that's a good set. I like to control what goes out. So now we'll go ahead and ask GPT-4 to build a summary. This probably will take a few seconds. But the key I wanted to highlight is this: the ability to pull personal data, use that human direction to quickly modify a shopping cart full, then generate a response in just a few seconds. That's the time savings. And so long as you can do that safely, following existing security lines, and using a generative AI that your enterprise has approved, you should be able to get some really amazing response very quickly and without, again, a big IT project, which involves fundamentally moving all of the information out of the sources that you might need to have a question answered from and re-indexing that in some new system or technology. You already have lots of great indexing. Many of them already support vector search. Why not upgrade your existing search engines with the add-on vector packages that are now out and take a look? You should be able to, again, get results very quickly, although I'm waiting right here for GPT-4, I think, to respond. So, there we go. And that's a pretty nice summary again. And you can see here also some disambiguation. It identified a second entity, right, which is me. And I think that speaks for itself. So I'm going to pause there. I would love to take any questions. Always happy to talk further about what we're doing at Swirl, but that's really the kind of outline of 3.0 we wanted to present. So we'd love to take any questions. Here we go. I have a question about GPT-4 for summarization. Yes. Do you have the ability to integrate your own LLMs? Yes. In the Enterprise Edition, there is we use a bunch of different packages so that you can plug in just about any generative AI you want, and including Cohere, Llama, Hugging Face, etc. So Swirl is all about that. There's also it's very easy to make that change if you want to in the public edition, and there actually is a PR outstanding to apply that to the public edition as well. So that'll be available in the community version very soon. I'd love to hear, does anybody have a particular favorite generative AI other than ChatGPT? It seems like it sucks up a lot of the oxygen when talking about AI and generative AI, but I'd love to hear if others are out there that people are big fans of and getting great results with. Here we go. How does Swirl RAG compare to a vector database? Okay, so I want to say this. First of all, RAG and a vector database are two completely different things. RAG is a workflow process that involves retrieval, augmentation, perhaps, which I think we could argue about what that means. But then the G part is generation. So retrieval is what the vector database, in theory, is focused on. Retrieval is nothing more than search. When you do a search in Outlook and you find a bunch of email messages, that's retrieval. Vector database is just a more advanced version of the older search engines. Older search engines look a bit like a structure from the back of the book. They are typically keyword oriented. Over time, keyword has been less and less effective, and particularly less effective in cross-language situations. So instead of using keyword search, people use embeddings or vector search. A vector is a numerical representation of data created by analyzing vast amounts of data. And what vectors are good at is identifying the context between things. But a vector database is no more or less than a search engine or a database with some embeddings capability built onto it. So while there are many companies that are out there saying, well, we're a vector database and you need us to do RAG, that's just marketing. You don't need that. You need anything to do retrieval so that you can identify the most relevant documents to a particular topic or query, and then you're going to create a prompt from those. That's really what RAG is about. And so if you didn't have a way of searching a bunch of data, you could put it in a vector database. If it was already in Elastic, Solr, OpenSearch, Postgres, BigQuery, those all have vector upgrades. So you could just upgrade them if you weren't getting the superb contextual search you needed, like returning, for example, an exact sentence that was highly relevant. That's the kind of stuff that makes the difference when you're doing RAG, but again, you don't have to pre-index. Most search engines, most search technologies, lots of NLP technologies can be used to do the same thing. And that's what Swirl does. Swirl does RAG on the fly in real time without pre-indexing, using the numerous search APIs you already have. Yes, question, can you use Azure OpenAI? Absolutely. So again, in the community version, there's a change coming in. There's a PR open right now to support all of the LLMs in enterprise that's already supported, and you can just switch over right away. It's a very easy change to use OpenAI models built in Azure. And if you have your own LLM, absolutely. Again, if you put it in Hugging Face, or it's very easy to go take the connector framework that we have and modify your own around it. Oh, here's another great question. For example, what about pre-generating AI summaries versus RAG? I think that's a fantastic idea. Essentially, one of the cool things you could do with Swirl is generate retrieval augmented generation summaries for a bunch of topics using the subscribe feature and turn those into almost like the Wikipedia of some topic or business. And you can have that be a curated step where, for example, you're managing, a bunch of shopping carts, right? That's very much the vision for ongoing AI summarization. And I think that pre-generating, of course, also lets you save on tokens, right? You don't need to generate this response every time on demand. It's really the moment for the on-demand RAG is for situations where you want to bring in live data, potentially, for example, the latest data, as in the case of solid tumor therapies. So again, very, very clear example where that's valuable. Also, if you're trying to pick up the latest email information, right? Some discussion, or the latest contracts in your OneDrive, right? That's when the doing that refresh regularly is a good idea. Oh, and so thanks for that question, Robbie. another question, my company uses Office 365. What's needed to deploy and enable my users to start using generative AI? So you can go right to the MS App Source and search for Swirl Meta Search. If you click on our offer link or contact link, your M365 admin can actually deploy Swirl Enterprise by themselves. And there's a guide on our website under docs.swirl.today. If you look at the M365 guide, it provides all the steps that are required. And I just want to be clear, these steps are required that your admin execute them. Swirl can't access your M365 account under any circumstances. Only by deploying the software and having your admin configure it through a thing called app registration can you ever search your own Office 365. So want to be very clear about that. It's not something that Swirl can do without you. Once you have that in place, you can immediately begin to RAG using the APIs or the Galaxy UI as shown. You can add other sources, whether those are enterprise sources like ServiceNow, Asana, Atlassian, etc., Salesforce, or if those are more token-based public or private systems that are single service setups, for example, like your Elastic, Solar, Postgres. All of those can be added to the M365 results, and you can add and add and add. I use it all the time myself. I will say all of us at Swirl get the great benefit of being able to search all the systems that we use all the time, and it's a massive time saver. Well, I think we're just about out of time. I'd like to thank everybody so much for joining us. Please check out, visit swirl.today for all the information you need, including links to GitHub, product information, etc. Feel free to join our free Slack channel. You'll find a link at the bottom of the support page there. We'd love to hear from you also if you're interested in talking about how these enterprise services can be deployed for you. Please feel free to contact us as well through hello@swirl.today. Thanks again for coming. Really appreciate it. Have a terrific day.